At the end of part 1 of our cyber trip, we made it into the Gigafactory and I showed some clips I'd taken, but really those clips were shot on my way out. This is Jim's footage and what it looked like as we were walking in. I was filming for the after-party livestream hosted by Zac and Jesse from the Now You Know channel, so my footage looks like this. And there wasn't disk space to record my clean feed, so I've got a couple shots and the footage Jim was kind enough to share from the factory floor. Jim's already produced a great walkthrough video on the Iowa Tesla Guy channel. Between that, EV Dave's factory walkthrough, and Kyle Connor's out of spec video, they've covered almost all of my big takeaways. But here are a couple things that surprised me but I haven't seen covered elsewhere, both from the tour and Elon's presentation. First, a minor thing, the underbed storage area in the truck's bed has dividers. They look pretty simple to remove and remind me of the Mach-E's front dividers. There's no escape switch in there, so I'm sure that's a legal requirement, but again, looks like it's easy to remove. Elon mentioned that experts said the Cybertruck couldn't be built.
That experts said was impossible.
Frankly, I was initially disappointed that there was so much understructure. Everyone kept saying exoskeleton, and to me that says something like a turtle or a crab where there's little to nothing on the inside. Then we heard about the giga castings and the structural battery, and suddenly there's a lot of intraskeleton helping the exoskeleton. I guess I had expected to see massive panels bent in origami being broken into a truck shape. Don't get me wrong, I thought that would be practically impossible, but I thought that's what they had come up with. But here in the factory, looking at the production lines, you can see they've done that where they could for the sail sections and other body panels. But the steel internal structure is really the glue that holds everything together as the castings, battery pack, and stainless steel skin assembles and tightens everything up. It's a place to run the wiring and attachment points for the doors and interior elements. Third, the giga castings are so impressive in person and uncoated, and seeing the flow of the aluminum within the pieces is fascinating. And to know it was injected in milliseconds is crazy, and the fact that they can get it out without massive warping blows my mind. I used to weld aluminum for a couple years, but that just leaves me with enough knowledge to be blown away. The fact that the crumple zones are built into them too was completely unexpected. I haven't seen other car factories, so I don't know if this assembly line or that is more or less impressive, but those castings are special in person. There's more specific details and footage on these in Sandy Munro's video interviewing the Cybertruck leadership team. Speaking of crumple zones, there's been a lot of consternation online about how the Cybertruck frunk is disappointing compared to what Ford, Rivian, and eventually what GM will offer. Those are more impressive frunks, but let's remember what was promised at the reveal event. Yeah, nothing. We saw one blurry photo of Elon's shoulder of a frunk. The few people who noticed at the time thought, ooh, that looks small. And of course it opened from the top only, which people didn't like after seeing the Lightning. So why not give us a big frunk? Shape, for one thing. The lower sloped hood is going to eat up interior volume. And they decided to increase lockable storage in the bed instead. And after seeing the crash-tested unit outside after the event, I realized that the space is really just a crumple zone. It's built as an impact zone, and the engineers threw owners a bone and gave them a bench or tiny storage area, but in an impact, that stuff is toast. So it would be great if it could be bigger or had outlets, but they never promised it. Number 5, a lot was made of the doors being bulletproof to a degree, and Tesla's got a good video with specifics about it on their channel. While that's cool, what surprised me at the end of the video is that the windows were down during the test, and the driver raises them at the end, intact. Obviously the bullets didn't go through, we saw that, but I was impressed with the windows being in line with so much force and vibration that they rolled up like nothing had happened. That seemed more impressive than the baseball test, which was funny but a gimmick. Number 6, they talked about the bed size and how it could fit a 4x8 sheet of plywood in it, but I haven't seen anyone notice that they showed it to us.
And it's got a super tough composite bed, no liner needed. The bed is 6 foot long, 4 foot wide, and you can fit 4x8 pieces of plywood in with the back down.
Again, in the presentation, they were focusing on the four-wheel steering, but the tailgate was down to show that it was turning with the max length. And what was inside it? Plywood. Well, OSB board. This stuff. I count at least 36 sheets, so that's about 15 3/4 inches of height, and at 48 pounds per sheet, about 1,728 pounds, again by my estimate. So we get a good sense of how the sloped back of the bed affects sheet goods stacking, as the pile does taper out a bit. As someone who used to haul a lot of plywood, this seems like it'll work just fine. Another Easter egg was the nod to the Ford-Tesla gamesmanship that's been going on over the last couple years, with the tow test versus the F-150 at the reveal event, and then the Ford execs talking about how Ford Lightning's Pro Power on board could help rescue a stranded Tesla.
You can even charge other EVs for your friends that own Teslas.
Well, without mentioning it, here's the Cybertruck using its outlet to save another EV driver. And if you don't blink and miss it, it's a Lightning.
That wasn't fair, was it? But so what?
Also glossed over was the vehicle-to-home capabilities when paired with the newer wall connector and Powerwall. They also didn't really mention the outlet count in the truck. There's no 12-volt cigarette lighter type outlets, but there are USB-Cs and two 120-volt outlets in the cab, two in the bed, and a 240-volt NEMA 1450 plug back there to power a welder, big tools, or charge another EV. This stuff seemed like it was originally part of the slide deck, but it didn't make the presentation. Like the Model X and Model Y, the Cybertruck looks like it's going to be tough to roll over. They only showed it for a couple seconds, but I was surprised how stable it looked. I tried to find other truck rollover tests to compare it to, but couldn't find any. Maybe it's just not done with trucks, but if someone knows of a resource, post it below because I'd love to see if there's as big a difference as I suspect. Or seeing how the Rivian R1T or Lightning would compare would be interesting. Something I was excited to see was accessories. A couple months ago we saw the Cybertruck with a custom tool rack at the lithium refining groundbreaking event, and I was hoping to see that and similar attachments to the bed. But other than the tent and the standard roof rails, we haven't seen anything like that. The website shows similar elements for attaching in and separating the bed, and some nice cargo bins, but it looks like we'll have to wait for third parties to develop a more standard style bed topper. Another minor letdown for me was the lack of a built-in air compressor. After seeing it in the Rivian, I thought it would be in the Cybertruck for sure. Again, in one of the Sandy Munro videos, they shared that the air suspension system didn't have enough air volume to efficiently then also inflate the tires, so they chose a separate compressor that could be powered by the truck and handle the job faster. And although this will be probably a more consistent option, I still wish they were able to build it in, but it does make sense. Especially after seeing the struggles Zac and Jesse had trying to use air tools with their Rivian system. Number 12. It's hard to tell from the factory tour footage, but there was an incredible depth to the Cybertruck line. I figured there was still a long way to get to any kind of production rate and everything was still being hand-built. But walking through and looking past the lines that we were being shown and up into different levels of the factory, you could see truck bodies waiting for their next steps, more parts and drive units waiting to go in, and everything seemed way further along than I had expected. And we've started to see that production show up in Joe Tagmeyer's drone shots. The engineers on the tour talked about how they were still in start-stop mode as they got things dialed in, so I'm sure it'll still take a while into 2024 to hit full stride, but there was much more to show than I'd expected. Before we get back to the day and after party, I want to take a minute to talk design, because I keep running into folks who say, it's so stupid and ugly, and that's fine, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But I also think that comes from the notion that Elon just scribbled it down and said, make this. He's had a hand in the design of all the Teslas, but the real designer is Franz. And in multiple interviews, he's talked about designing the truck, making the full-size model, and presenting it to Elon. So if Franz designed it after designing cars like the beautiful Model S, how did it come out so strange? I used to have a hard time with abstract art, and still to some degree do, but something in college changed my mind when I first saw Picasso's more realistic work and realized that if he could paint like this, but chose to make work like this, it was on purpose, and with the intention to do something new. It wasn't because he couldn't do the same old thing, but because he had no interest in doing that. From pictures, the Cybertruck looks like a wedge, but in real life it feels intentional, and in a way that reminds me of the architectural designs by Frank Gehry or the Walker Art Center here in Minneapolis by Herzog and de Meuron. each of which deserves a second and closer look. Time will tell how the Cybertruck ages and how its utility works in practice. I'm sure this year will be filled with feats of strength and epic fails, and we'll see how it all shakes out. Okay, enough of me pontificating, back to the day.
Just a quick second to take a look behind us, and I think on the live stream we're going to just play this video all by itself. We're getting some live views from inside the Gigafactory. We're seeing a Cybertruck up on a lift, which is pretty cool. Lots of cyber lighting and everything. Couple of them. So what is that telling us? Look at the wheel on that thing. Man, let me get out of the way. Look at the wheel. Look at that distance. Now, of course, this is up on a jack, so that's there's no suspension. That's the lowest it could be, but damn, that is a lot of room.
Also, there's more than 10 of them.
Once in a long while, a product comes along that is rare.
The presentation by Elon was streamed by Tesla, and you'll get better footage there. I was off to the side, but it was still cool to be in the room, although a little hard to see through all the cell phones. We walked out through the factory the same way we entered, and outside they'd staged lots of Cybertrucks, furthering my opinion that they'd been building them at a decent clip already. The matte black one was cool to see. The tent was cool, but expensive at $3,000 as an accessory. It seemed like it would be cool once you were up there, but quite a climb from the ground. Still, a nice canopy area and enough space underneath to keep your gear dry. Then on the interior, it was nice to see the back doors open and the large space with the seats up. The storage bins underneath are accessories. Without those, it would just be flat space. The frunk is pretty small, but we've talked about that. It was cool to see the Baja Cybertruck, but other than the sign, there wasn't much to learn about it. I found the crash test vehicles to be really fascinating. Not just seeing how the crash zones worked, but how the sides buckled or didn't, and if you'd be able to get out after a collision. I had imagined fused and extremely warped panels with torn or jagged metal everywhere, but it was much better than I expected. Of course, I'm no expert, but I've unfortunately seen enough accidents with regular vehicles for comparison. Come to think of it, this might be the reason for the baseball test on the glass. If the side windows are unbreakable, it makes emergency extractions that much more difficult. Jim did manage to get a little stainless steel sliver while checking to see how hard the side mirrors were to remove. But as of recording this, he's survived. We hung out in front of the factory for a while, taking it all in, then reconnected with Dave and Greg for an Uber back to the Luster Pearl East for the after party. The after party was really a pre, during, and after party. Zac and Jesse hosted and streamed for 8 hours, while the production was simulcast to multiple other channels. Other creators popped in for segments or panels that went on through the day and into the night. Lots of EV content creators got to share their thoughts and impressions on the truck, the utility, and accessories, both on stage and in the crowd. A huge personal thank you to Zac and Jesse for having me down to help support the event, and for their marathon hosting for everyone to watch online. The whole thing went very smoothly, and if you haven't seen the stream, I encourage you to check it out and jump around to see your favorite creators' real-time reactions. I'd meant to get an interview with the guys after the event, but by the time we were heading out, we were all exhausted and I was out of batteries. So, a sure sign of a great night. Instead, we all went downtown for a very late dinner. Jim had spent the evening meeting and talking to tons of other folks from YouTube, so it was nice to sit down and decompress and talk about the wild day.
The after party's been wonderful. It's just been kind of a sensory overload for me, and it's really kind of hard. I'm sure there's so much that's gone into my brain that just hasn't been processed yet. But I got to meet a lot of really great people. I got to meet a lot of, I fanned out on a lot of YouTubers here, and then they're just really genuinely good, nice people, and this is a wonderful community.
Back in my room, I spent a couple more hours backing up footage and starting to edit. I thought about staying up all night to get a recap out quickly, but there was so much to say, and I knew we had a long road trip back, so I did the responsible thing and got some sleep. Luckily, checkout was at 11, and I was able to get up and get a little done before we met for lunch and the day's adventure. The upright ATV company LyteHorse had been a sponsor of the after party, and so we were headed to an undisclosed location near Austin for some fun, testing, and to film a review for the Now You Know channel. Friday, early afternoon, and we are going to do a little bit more adventuring here in Texas, but we have stopped at a supercharger, around 20% when we got here. We can look at our trip, give you the update on that. Since our last charge, 50 miles, just running around Austin, and then overall on our trip are 1,331 miles, with an average energy consumption of 367. We didn't have a lot of time preconditioning, but the weather's nice. But we're only pulling 174 right now. We were up over 200 for a couple minutes, but just going to be here for a little bit, take the edge off our drive when we head home to Minnesota later today. This was the first any of us had seen of Tesla removing the bollards at a supercharger. We assumed it was because of Cybertrucks charging here, but since then we've seen them removed across the country, so it could be Cybertruck or it could be for an easier opening for other EVs. After something like 25 minutes, we were back on our way with 73%. We got out to the property with cows and cactus, and the LyteHorse guys were charged and ready. I won't spend too much time on this since Jesse and Zac already published their in-depth video with all the best shots, more info, and a discount. This is Jim's first ride. I'll show mine in a bit, but as folks were riding, I was shooting B-roll and walking around with cameras. How was it?
Oh my god. It's a machine, that's for sure. Check it out.
The LyteHorse is all electric and it's fun, but the throttle on mine was a little touchy, so there is a learning curve. I'm definitely not the target audience for these, but I think my brothers would have a blast on them and get into shenanigans.
All right. Well, I was not on. You don't want me to.
Oh, damn.
That was the best slide yet.
That was.
This will be a good outtake. Well, I'm checking out the LyteHorse here today. Next on Now You Know. Check that one out.
After a while, we shot the interview and wrapped up around 4:30. If we were smart, we would have stayed another night in Austin and had a good dinner and night's sleep, but I've never let doing the smart thing stop me. So we dropped Zac and Jesse off at a restaurant, said our goodbyes, and hit the road.
So we just let everybody go. It's like, hey, we're heading home. And we just left.
It'll be another straight shot overnight road trip to Minnesota that I'll save for the next episode. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and thanks again to Jim for sharing the factory footage. Happy road tripping, and have a great day.